Story 1. This incident took place in the early 2000s, probably during the 2003 to 2004 school year. Throughout the entire year, there was a crime wave of people having items stolen from their locked lockers. Not everyone was affected, but enough that everyone knew someone it happened to. The school's only defense was that it was our fault for sharing locker combinations with our friends. They also charged us every time we had to get the combination changed on a locker, like after a theft, for instance, because it was assumed to be our fault. Well, I had my graphing calculator taken out of my locker. I also never gave out my combination to anyone, mostly because my friends were troublemakers and we played pranks on each other all the time. So I was out $150 for the calculator and another $150 to change the combination, getting a locksmith to change out the lock. This is 2003 money, so it's a bit more than now. To anyone who has ever had to buy a Texas Instruments 86 in 23 or 2004, you'll know how much these devices cost. My dad was drinking buddies with one of the county detectives. I'll call him Detective Buddy and/or Uncle Buddy. He went in to talk to the school about this string of thefts going on so he could get the security camera footage for the day my calculator went missing and got completely brushed off as it was a non-existent problem, and he must have given out his locker combination. The principal told him he would need a warrant to get the camera footage. Then when he got the warrant, the school fought it in court, citing student privacy. Enter the pro revenge. Detective Buddy shows up at our house with a laptop in a laptop bag. He says, "Throw this in your locker and tell everyone you know about your brand new laptop." "Okay, sure, Uncle Buddy," I replied. 3 days later, I show up at my locker between classes, and the laptop is gone, the bag too, nowhere to be seen, as is a 24-ounce bottle of soda and possibly some pens. I take my phone out and text him that the laptop got taken. "Stand by for the commotion. Oh, and you reported the theft to the police, FYI, he replies back. "Okay," I reply, confused. I go about the rest of my day and don't hear anything back. The following morning, Detective Buddy comes to the school with 3 uniformed officers and pulls a student, Dave, out of class, as well as his mom, who works in the front office. The principal is upset. I don't actually hear the officers, but the principal is furious to no end that he had the audacity to accuse them of theft, and he couldn't just take them out of his school, etc. Well, it turns out there was a tracker in the laptop bag, and Uncle Buddy got a warrant to search a particular house. The laptop had a value of over $1,000, making it a felony. The next afternoon, he set up a tent with a table just outside of school grounds. He also had a banner across the top: "If you have had something stolen from your locker, see me." By the next morning, Dave and his mom made the paper. Apparently, Dave allegedly used his mom's login information to get onto the school network and get the locker combinations for basically everyone. Then he just opened random lockers looking for valuables to steal if he didn't get info on a specific locker to target. When he set up the stand to get more people reporting thefts, he racked up an astounding number of charges. Each locker counted as a separate misdemeanor unless the stolen object was worth more than $1,000, in which case it was a felony. In less than a week, Uncle Buddy opened and broke an investigation, and they charged Dave and his mom with 9 felonies and 35 misdemeanor charges. When I finally got the story from Buddy, he explained the situation. He had me stash a brand new laptop with a GPS tracking unit in my locker, then get it stolen deliberately, and then he got a warrant to search the property it had been taken to. The interesting thing to stress is that the laptop was over $1,000 in value, pushing the theft from a misdemeanor into felony level. There were also another 8 felony charges for items like jewelry that was stolen from other people's lockers and recovered. So any of the locker break-ins that amounted to over $1,000 stolen was a felony charge, and less than $1,000 was a misdemeanor charge. The cool thing was that because the calculator and the laptop were separate days and the combination changed between the days, he caught a felony and a misdemeanor charge off me alone. The 9 felony thefts ended up in the $12,000 range total, and the 35 misdemeanor charges were somewhere in the range of $3,000 total in value. Now that's an awful lot of stuff stolen, but I need to stress that this is only what was proven stolen. This is what they caught him with in his possession that they could trace back to someone. They also didn't let them plead to anything. It was our small town's highest profile crime in years, and without a doubt one of the worst crime sprees the county had seen in decades. Next up on the revenge. Everyone who had been charged $150 to get their locker combinations changed sued the school district in a class action lawsuit. The justification was that the school did nothing to investigate the 44 proven, and more than likely 200-plus cases of locker theft, and then charged money to get the locker combinations changed. There were 218 people in the class, and in total, everyone got $85 after attorney's fees. The principal also lost his job for being uncooperative and not bothering to attempt to deal with the massive problem that was reported to him going on at the school. The interesting thing I need to point out is that the school brought in a locksmith to change out the locks. That's why they justified charging $150. Well, the school already paid the $150 a locker, but they also had to return $100 per locker, meaning that they were out $2,800 plus their legal fees for that class action suit. Next comes the criminal trial and the fallout. The prosecutor's deal was 10 years in prison, 5 in juvenile detention, and 5 in adult prison for Dave and 15 for Dave's mom. Well, they refused that deal, and it went to trial. Dave got 1 year in prison for each felony, the state minimum, and 1 month probation for each misdemeanor. So 9 years plus 35 months of probation. His mom received 18 years of jail and 6 years probation. Having attended much of the best parts of the trial, I will say this: they had Dave on camera entering 20-plus lockers, and they had them in possession of stolen goods for every single charge they made against them. The judge was also not amused that there were likely other reported crimes that they got away with because they couldn't prove it or they weren't reported. Dave's mom got it worse. That was an interesting sentencing to show up for. But the most important thing is that I got my graphing calculator back. It had my name engraved inside the battery compartment. I still have it, as well as a cool story to tell. Story 2. This incident occurred approximately 2 years ago when I was still attending dental school. I apologize for any errors, as English is not my native language. I want to begin by stating that I am a very courteous dentist. While I may not be the kindest person in general, I am exceptionally polite to my patients. I am also quite skilled in my profession. Although I won't claim to be the best, I know I am proficient. On that particular day, however, I was not in a pleasant mood. A series of unfortunate events occurred in the morning, ruining my day. To make matters worse, I arrived at work only to discover that Dr. Smith, a pseudonym, of course, was the attending physician. He is truly dreadful. He consistently arrives 15 minutes after we begin working on our patients. I don't believe he realizes that we are merely students and might require assistance. This revelation only worsened my mood. The secretary assigned me a patient. It's important to note that if a patient requests a same-gender doctor for religious reasons, we are obligated to accommodate them. However, if a patient wants another doctor without a valid reason, it's at our discretion. We can either refer them to another doctor or inform them that it's either us or no one, and they are free to leave if they are dissatisfied. I received the patient, put on a smile, and approached her. She looked at me and said, "Hi, I'm waiting for Dr. Jones." I replied, "Yes, I am Dr. Jones." She glanced at me again, clearly disappointed, and said, "Oh, I assumed Dr. Jones was a man." I tried to use my most pleasant tone while responding, "Well, you were mistaken." There was a moment of silence as I prepared my equipment. Then I heard a forced, brief laugh from her. "Look, dear, I'm not saying you're bad at your job. I'm sure you're really good at it. But I want to extract my tooth, and that requires a lot of strength. I believe it would be better suited for a male doctor." At this point, I was quite irritated, but still attempting to be polite. "I assure you, I have extracted many teeth before, and I can do it as well as any man," I replied. She remained silent. I left to retrieve some additional supplies I needed. As soon as I departed, I saw her leap from her chair and approach the male nurse, imploring him to extract the tooth instead of me. He calmly explained to her that he was not a doctor and that she should allow me to do my job. By this time, I was seething. I returned to her and asked, "Do you want a male doctor?" She confirmed that she did. I responded, "Fine, then." I looked around, and there he was, the exact person I was searching for, Kai. Kai is one of my classmates, and he is incredibly incompetent. He is absolutely terrible at his job. We even had a wager on when he would be dismissed from the program. I brought the patient to Kai and asked if he wanted to take my patient. He was more than happy to oblige. Then I sat back and observed. To my delight, Kai was also working under Dr. Smith, which meant he wouldn't receive any assistance for the first 10-15 minutes. It felt like an early holiday gift. The procedure was a disaster, and I relished every moment of it. I won't go into detail about the extent of the patient's discomfort, but I will say that she was in tears when it was finally over. It's unfortunate that Kai dropped out of the program shortly after. I would have referred all similar patients to him. Story 3. It was November 2009, and I was jamming to "I Got a Feeling" by the Black Eyed Peas while searching for a cheap apartment. I found a great ad on Craigslist and arranged for a viewing. I met the landlady, a rather unpleasant woman with a Betty Page haircut. I wasn't there for the company, though, just for the affordable room. The place wasn't in the best shape, but it was cheap, so I told her I was interested. She said the place was mine if I could get the deposit to her by the end of the day. Sweet. I rushed to the bank and grabbed the $450 needed, which was half a month's rent. We both signed a standard lease, and I asked when I could get the key to move in. She said it would be a couple of days since the current tenant still had to collect their belongings. I was crashing on a friend's couch for the time being, so I just relaxed, explored the city, and enjoyed my first few weeks in a new place. A couple of days passed, and I hadn't heard anything from the landlady. Frustrated, I left a few stern voicemails, but still, I got no response. Finally, she left me a voicemail apologizing, saying she couldn't rent the place to me anymore. I started to get upset, but I'm usually pretty calm, so I did my research and learned that if someone backs out of a lease without a valid reason, the other party is entitled to double the deposit they placed. That meant she owed me about $900. I left more messages and emails, but she kept ignoring me, no responses on the phone or through email. I was fed up. Since I had just accepted a new job that didn't start until the end of the month, I had some spare time. It was about the third week of November 2009. I hopped on the bus, bought a magazine, and sat at the bus stop across from the rental house, waiting. I waited for a couple of hours, but it was well worth it. I saw her showing the unit to another unsuspecting person. I kept my cool and waited for her to finish with a potential renter. Then, I made my way over to the house to confront her. As soon as she saw me, she started making excuses, claiming that the previous tenant had changed their mind, and that's why she couldn't rent to me. I had heard enough. I stood my ground, facing her directly, and said, "Listen, you owe me $900 as required by law, and if I don't have it by the end of the day, I'll be going straight to the police." Her face turned pale, and for a moment, I thought she might get sick right there in front of me. She said, "Hold on, I'll get you your money." I remember thinking, wow, that was easier than I expected. She went upstairs. The rental unit was a basement apartment in the house she lived in and, to my surprise, handed me a wad of cash. She said, "Here, this is ruining my Christmas, but take it." She almost knocked me over as she shoved the messy bundle of money into my hands. "Thank you. Good day," I said, taking the cash, counting it, and walking away. I didn't look back. I got on the first bus heading toward my friend's place. It wasn't until I got home that I calmed down and realized it was going to be a great holiday, thanks to a dishonest landlady. However, the story didn't end there. About a week later, I got a phone call from a friend asking if the lady in the news was the same one who had scammed me. I was confused at first. Sure enough, It turned out this woman had been running the same scam on multiple victims. I was horrified, not just because I had almost been scammed, but because I realized the money I had received likely came from someone else who was now homeless for the holidays. I headed straight to the police station. There, I saw a line of distraught people filing reports about being scammed by this woman. I felt terrible. When it was my turn, I told the intake officer my whole story, how I fell for the scam, how I left frustrated voicemails, how I staked out the rental to confront her, demanded double the deposit back, and got it. I also confessed that I had taken money that belonged to other victims. The officer looked at me and said, "You were the only one smart enough to confront her in a reasonable way. You earned that money? Don't worry about it." As I was leaving, a young woman who had overheard my story approached me and asked, "Did you get your money back from that woman?" Feeling a bit embarrassed, I replied, "Actually, I got double my deposit back when I threatened her with the police." The woman blinked a few times, then smiled and started a slow clap. She announced to the other victims still waiting in the lobby, "This guy took her for double the deposit." I cringed. But then, in a surprising turn of events, the entire line of victims began applauding. I suppose they felt some satisfaction knowing that, while their money was gone, someone had managed to get back at her. Their reaction lifted my spirits. The cops laughed, and we all shared a brief moment of holiday cheer at the woman's expense. I left the police station with a clean conscience and a smile on my face, thoroughly enjoying every last penny of that dishonest landlady's ill-gotten money. Story 4. This story takes place about 2 years ago when I worked at a well-known pizza chain restaurant. If Scooby-Doo could say it, he would call it Ramino's. I started as a cashier, handling the register and placing orders. Eventually, I learned to make pizzas. Over time, the store manager wanted to promote me to shift runner, which is a step below assistant manager. As a shift runner, I'd be in charge of running the shift, delegating roles, and telling employees when they could leave. While I was working there, a guy who had previously been an assistant manager returned as a delivery driver. He had left during a busy evening when the store was overwhelmed with orders and customers, apparently due to stress. When he first started for the second time, I didn't know who he was. He seemed nice at first, but after a few days, he kept trying to be the person in charge. I had to remind him of his place a few times when I was running the shift. I wasn't on the best terms with the store manager. We had a few disagreements, mostly from him micromanaging when we were really busy. I told him to back off and let me do my job. When I went to him about the delivery driver, we'll call him Brad, trying to act as a manager, he didn't seem to care. I discussed the situation with an assistant manager I was friends with, we'll call him Chad, who advised me to confront Brad directly. One day, while I was in the office working on the computer, Brad came in and started talking about an order. As I was finishing up, he knelt down, seemingly picking something up. Suddenly, he jabbed a finger into my chest. I froze, unsure of what to do. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened to me. I had experienced similar incidents in high school. I got up and went outside, slamming the door hard. I was pacing back and forth, shaking with anger and confusion. Brad followed me, acting as if nothing had happened and lecturing me about keeping the back door locked. We had a heated exchange, and Chad came out after hearing the commotion. Seeing how upset I was, he sent Brad inside and checked on me. I called my mom and explained what happened. She advised me to contact the store manager. When I did, he dismissed the situation, saying we needed to grow up. Unsatisfied with his response, I called the district manager, but got no reply. I decided to file a police report. The day Brad was arrested, we were all working. The look on his and the store manager's faces was priceless. However, Brad was released a couple of hours later, bailed out by the district manager. I was told neither Brad nor I would be allowed to return to work until after the court hearing. Yet, Brad was back at work the next day. When I called the district manager about this, he offered me a position at a store over an hour away, without guaranteeing the same position and pay. I declined the offer and quit. On the court day, despite my efforts, Brad was found not guilty due to lack of evidence. However, my family, who had many connections in the community, spread the word about what had happened. As a result, the restaurant lost a significant amount of business. Romino's fired the district manager, store manager, and Brad, banning them from all their stores. In the end, though the legal system didn't provide justice, the community's response and the consequences faced by those involved gave me a sense of vindication. Story 5. This event took place a few months ago, but someone suggested I share it here. There are 2 parts to this revenge, so bear with me. I had just moved into a new apartment complex. According to the lease, reserved parking was available, and all such spots were clearly marked reserved. Fine. I worked nights and got home at 5:30 n.m., parking in a spot that definitely had no reserved markings. When I woke up at 2 p.m., my dad wanted to meet me for lunch. Everything seemed fine, except my car was gone. I headed to the leasing office to inquire about the situation. Sure enough, my car had been towed. It turns out that the spot was numbered, but the reserved sign was missing. The towing company claimed that all numbered spots are reserved, so the tow is legal. I showed them the lease agreement, which specifically stated that all such spots would be marked reserved. It was even in quotation marks. Well, I needed my car, lunch plans were ruined, and my dad ended up driving me to the impound lot. I paid the fee but immediately went home and charged it back through my bank. I submitted photos of the spot, the lease agreement, and everything else as evidence. The bank sided with me, and I got my money back. But I wasn't finished with the towing company yet. I contacted the city and found the department that handles parking enforcement. I submitted the same photos to them along with my explanation. They also agreed with me and fined the towing company. I received a small portion of that fine and would have gotten my money back from them if I hadn't already. I wasn't done yet, though. Remember how I mentioned I work nights? Well, I work as a mobile security guard. In addition to escorting valuable items, responding to alarms, and assisting technicians at high-risk sites, we're also required to check various businesses that pay for nightly checks. Some of these checks include parking enforcement. I didn't want to risk my job, so instead of doing something petty, I came up with a better plan. As a supervisor, I had a monthly opportunity to submit security suggestions to each site. That month, every site where we handled parking checks and used this particular towing company, I suggested switching to another company. I noted that the response times were better and that the new company dealt with situations more fairly. Within 3 months, about half of those clients took my suggestion. Towing companies don't charge for lot patrols since they make money off the tows, so switching didn't cost the businesses anything. In the end, I cost the towing company 4 apartment complexes, 3 paid lots, and 2 business complexes worth of lots. But there was still one more person I wanted revenge against, the resident who had me towed. My towing receipt had "resident request" listed on it. I followed up on the details and found out that they also worked nights. They had come home at 9:30 a.m. when the lot was practically empty, and I had been in their spot. If this had been a repeated issue, or if there had been no other spots available, fine. But calling for a tow when the spot right next to it was open, and this was the first time, was a pretty rude move. So I watched their car for about a month, observing when it was there and when it was gone. It seemed to stay in the same spot for 2 days straight every Wednesday and Thursday, which I guessed were their days off. It was time for my own vehicle's tag renewal, and the move had messed up the process. My year sticker got mailed to the wrong address. I went to the Department of Motor Vehicles, explained the situation, and received a new sticker. However, they accidentally gave me a month sticker as well. I put the year sticker on my car and waited for Wednesday. On Wednesday, I placed the month sticker over the residence sticker. Now, the plates showed that they expired in April instead of October. I then pointed this out to the towing company's patrol officer, who, per the contract, placed a 24-hour warning sticker on the car. At this point, it was a gamble. Would the resident run errands before the 24 hours were up? It turned out they didn't. The next day, the towing company towed their vehicle, while I sat nearby, laughing quietly to myself. I have no idea how that situation resolved, considering the sticker I placed on their car wasn't valid and the car wasn't actually expired. The towing company had no way to know that, though. I'm not sure what the law says about that, but I do know that the inconvenience they caused me was repaid in full, and the towing company got more than their fair share of trouble. Story 6. Back in the early 2000s, I worked at Blockbuster Video in the United Kingdom. While it wasn't my first job, I started while still in high school, so it was pretty close. I had a good working relationship with my boss and quickly moved up to one of the deputy manager positions. I became the person the manager would call to cover shifts, and unless I had a really good reason, I always did because I genuinely enjoyed the job. Being a movie enthusiast, I loved talking to customers about films, and it didn't hurt that I could rent any movie anytime for free. One particular Saturday, we were incredibly busy. 3 staff members had called in sick. We had a big movie release that week, and a major video game had just come out the day before. It was absolute chaos. Midway through my shift, a man came in and claimed he had bought a game from the store the previous week and wanted a refund. He said I had served him but hadn't given him a receipt. I did vaguely remember serving him but didn't recall exactly what he had bought. While I usually gave receipts automatically, I couldn't guarantee I had in this instance. The problem was that this particular game was supposed to be the only copy we had. Our inventory said it was still in the store, but this man had it. That meant it had somehow left the store without being processed, which left a few possibilities. The customer might have stolen it. There could have been a mistake on my part, or worse, I might have accidentally handed it to him without processing the payment. My manager was on shift with me, so he processed the refund and took the game back, but didn't speak to me for the rest of the shift. When we closed the store that night, he pulled me into the office and accused me of stealing. Without any evidence, he claimed that I had sold the game and pocketed the money. Naturally, I denied the accusation, but things got heated. He ended up telling me to hand in my notice and gave me 2 weeks. Heartbroken, I complied. I loved that job and knew I was innocent. I may have made a mistake, but I would never intentionally steal. 2 weeks later, on my last shift, the area manager happened to come in. I had a good relationship with the area manager, having been hired by them originally. They often noted that I was almost always on shift whenever they came in. The area manager asked how I was, and I mentioned that I was sad about leaving. They hadn't known I was resigning and asked why. I explained the situation, and they immediately went to the office. About half an hour later, I got a call to come to the office. The area manager was sitting there, watching the security footage from the day the man claimed to have bought the game. The footage showed me serving him, but as he left, he stopped to chat with the store manager. There was no audio on the cameras, but they were clearly talking. The manager had been working on some new inventory at the time. At one point, the manager turned his back on the customer, and it was then that the customer reached over the counter, grabbed something, and left. The area manager assumed this was the game. The store manager was called into the office. He was first asked why I had handed in my notice without a proper meeting with the area manager or any formal investigation. If I had been guilty, I would have been dismissed immediately. The manager just mumbled something about not wanting to make a big deal. Then, the area manager asked the store manager to explain what happened in the security footage. The manager stayed silent. At that point, the area manager asked me to retract my resignation, which I did. I also cleverly requested a few extra days of paid holiday due to the embarrassment caused by the false accusation, and the area manager agreed. They also mentioned that they would be reviewing a month's worth of security footage because the manager's negligence was a significant concern. The color drained from the store manager's face, but nothing further was said that evening. I finished my shift and left with the area manager, looking forward to my week off. 3 days later, I received a phone call from the area manager asking if I could meet them at the store. I agreed. When I arrived, they took me to the office and informed me that an investigation had uncovered some alarming activities. Over the past month, the manager had been using the store after hours for personal reasons. On multiple occasions, after closing, he had invited people into the store. One night, he had hosted a poker game in the staff room. We later found out he had been using money from the tills to cover his losses and submitting fake refund notices to balance the books. On 3 other occasions, he was seen bringing in women to his office. These women were known to be involved in illegal activities in the area, and the manager, who was married, was engaging in inappropriate behavior with them. The manager was immediately suspended while an investigation took place. The area manager asked me to step in and manage the store during the manager's absence. After the investigation was completed, it was revealed that the manager had been issuing thousands of pounds in fake refunds each month, falsifying who had issued the refunds to avoid suspicion. This had been going on for years across multiple stores where he had worked. Because the manager falsely accused me of something I didn't do, he ended up losing his job and his marriage. Meanwhile, I got a promotion and a nice raise. Story 7. I had just walked out of the local megamart after self-checking 8 items, 3 pairs of inflatable pool toys, and 2 mesh bags filled with about 1,000 little chocolate eggs. If someone had been watching carelessly, it might have looked like I was scanning the same item twice, and then putting both in the bagging area, which could seem suspicious. But I had scanned each item properly, and my receipt reflected 8 items, 2 of each, for 4 different products. I was carrying everything with the mesh bags of chocolate eggs on the bottom, hanging from my fingers, while the 6 sturdy cardboard boxes of pool toys were stacked on top, supported by my hands. It was quite a handful, but it was a good way to keep the eggs from sliding off the top, which would have been a long drop. I had barely taken a few steps out of the store when an overly eager employee in a yellow vest came running after me. Employee, sir, stop. Me, what's up? Employee, please put down the boxes. Me, still walking, sure, my car is just over there. Employee, stop right there, sir. Me, my car is like 20 yards away. Follow me, and I'll put everything down. The receipt is in my pocket. Employee, drop it now. Drop it. Really? I was holding some chocolate eggs, 2 plastic donuts, 2 floating unicorns, and 2 pool loungers. Did he seriously think I was armed with anything dangerous? But you know what? Fine. I stared at him and dropped everything right where I was holding them. I gave a gentle tug to the mesh bag of eggs, hoping it would break, and it did. Everything slammed into the ground. The 6 boxes smashed some of the eggs, while the rest scattered everywhere, many starting to melt in the scorching heat. Seagulls showed up almost immediately. I carefully pulled out my receipt, showed it to him, and picked up my things before heading to my car. I took a picture of the mess and considered sending a complaint to store management. Maybe they'd care. Before I left, I told the employee, "Hey, you better clean that up, there could be dogs around, and chocolate isn't good for them. Hurry up, since you're so great at keeping things under control." I'm out $15.99, or whatever the eggs cost, but honestly, I couldn't care less. Edit. Wow, so many comments. Let me address a few common ones. First of all, I apologize for my misplaced use of the word psychotic. I was using it in the casual way we did in the 1980s when I was in high school. I recognize the sensitivity around mental health issues, and I've dealt with them in my personal life. I understand it wasn't appropriate, and I'll be more mindful in the future. As for why I didn't storm back into the store to demand replacements or speak to someone, here's the thing. Inflatable pool toys are packed really well in sturdy little cardboard boxes with thick staples. I'm not sure why, but I assume it's to fit a large volume into a tight space. Because of that, the chance of damaging anything inside those boxes by dropping them was 0. When I got home, apart from a few dents on the boxes and some chocolate smears, the toys were completely fine. That thought crossed my mind when I dropped them, except for the eggs, of course, and that was the point. I had a large group of people waiting for these items at home, especially a bunch of kids eager to jump into the pool. None of this was worth wasting more time in the store. I've spent more time talking about it than the incident itself took. For what it's worth, I doubt I could have gotten a refund for the eggs. I recognize that what I did was impulsive and unwise. Even with the employee's absurd "drop it," I could have gently placed everything on the ground. But in that moment, I didn't feel like it, and I still don't regret it for a second.